Good morning, guys. Okay, so today we're going to start our new reading standard, and actually it's really similar to the standard that we've already been working on, which is inferences. And so the main difference is going to be this. The standard that we have been working on with inferences is for fiction text. In other words, stories that are made up. Okay, what we're moving to now is we're going to be working on stories that are not made up. So these are nonfiction. Okay? And so we're going to start working with a strategy to answer questions called the RACE strategy. And so I will walk you through this, and I'm going to explain how to answer a question using the RACE strategy. And then you guys are going to practice it, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to read this story. And again, this is a nonfiction, so it's a short story that has facts, real life, accurate, all that good stuff. Cell phones in schools. As smartphones become more and more common, the debate about whether students in schools should be able to use them rages on. Some say that cell phones can be used for positive reasons like research and student safety. Students can use their phones for many productive purposes, using the calculator, looking up the definitions of words, organizing their assignments in a calendar, and using apps to study. They also argue that allowing students to use cell phones in school prepares students for adult life, in which they will use technology daily. Teachers, however, argue that phones are too distracting. They say that students are often too tempted to play games, text each other, and take pictures during instructional time. They can also cheat on assignments by looking up answers online. Teachers do not trust that students will use their phones responsibly or appropriately if they have them. They believe that phones are too much of a distraction and take away from a student's overall education. Okay, so the first thing you're going to have to be able to do to answer questions about a passage is to read the entire passage. So notice I didn't skip down, I didn't start answering questions. The first thing I did was read the entire passage, okay? Now I'm going to read the directions. It says using the RACE strategy use the RACE strategy to answer the following question using the checklist as you write. Do you think kids should have phones? Explain using sources or reasons from the text. Okay, so let me scroll down a little. The RACE strategy stands for this. The R is for restate. Okay, restate your question. As 4th and 5th graders, we have to be able to restate the question. So the question here is, do you think kids should have phones? So I'm going to think about that. This is an opinion, obviously. Do you think kids should have phones? I'm going to say no. So now I can't just say no. I have to restate the question. So I'm going to start it out with, I do not think kids should have phones in school. So there is my R. I have restated the question and I've given my answer. Okay? That ties into part A of the RACE strategy. A is your answer. Now, most of the time, like 99% of the time, you can restate an answer in the same sentence. Okay? Because if you don't, that's going to just sound weird, because if you're just restating, then that's not a complete sentence. Okay? Like if I just said, think kids should have phones. That would be my restating, but I didn't put anything with it, so that doesn't make sense. Okay? So you're going to restate and you're going to answer together. So if I were doing this paper pencil, could come down here and I could check off the R and I could check off the A because I've already done that. Okay? Now I have to cite evidence. That's what the C stands for. Cite evidence. And that means I go back in the passage and I use evidence. I use pieces. I pull out what the author has said and I use it to help me. Remember, we're all about proving things. Okay? Now, I'm not just going to start quoting from the story, though. I'm going to use a stem. And a stem, I just mean a sentence stem. You don't have to get all fancy. You can just use the text states, because that's accurate. The text states this, okay? So I'm going to say, the text states. Now I'm going to pretend that the story is actually talking, so I'm going to use quotation marks correctly. So I'm getting ready to put what the text said. So I need to put a comma, and then I'm going to put a quotation mark. Now I'm going to pull evidence, and this is what some of you are having trouble with. I'm going to pull evidence that proves that. I'm not just going to put random evidence in there. Okay, I'm going to go find where it says that it's not a good idea. Okay. Okay, so that would be here. Teachers argue that phones are too distracting. Okay, so I'm going to use that part, and I'm going to copy it just like it's written. If it has a capital, I put a capital. If it has a comma, I put a comma, because if I'm quoting from the text, it's identical to what the text says. So I'm just copying word for word because I'm quoting. Teachers, however, argue that phones are too distracting. They say that kids are often too tempted to play games, text each other, and take pictures during instructional time. End that sentence, and I'm going to end that quote. Okay, I have just cited from the text. I've pulled out evidence from the text that's going to help support my answer. Okay, so I'm going to go back and reread what I have so far, and I'm going to check off my list. Did I restate and did I answer? I do not think kids should have phones in school. Yes, I restated the question. I didn't just say no. And I gave an answer. My answer was no. Now I'm doing the C of race. I'm citing from the text. So I have my stem. The text states. I'm going to pull out pieces, and notice I didn't just pull out a part of a sentence. I pulled out the whole sentence. And actually here I used two sentences, okay? So the text states, teachers, however, argue that phones are too distracting. They say that kids are often too tempted to play games, text each other, and take pictures during instructional time. Now I'm almost done with my race strategy. The last part of my race strategy is the E. And now this is where I explain. So it's kind of like when we were inferring, we talked about our background knowledge, and we use that to help us make an inference. Well, here we're not really making an inference because we're not having to think about what the author is trying to tell us. Here we're formulating our own answer. So now I'm just going to explain. Can I use personal experience? Absolutely. Okay, but I'm not going to start it out with like using my background knowledge. Okay, I'm just going to explain. So I'm going to think about this. Do I have personal experience, or do I know that kids are often tempted to play? So I might start my E portion of the race strategy out with, as a teacher, there have been many times that students should have been working on an assignment. However, I don't know why that changed to a capital, but we don't need a capital H there. However, when they had their phone out, instead of working, change that too, they were distracted by their phone, and let's not say wasted time. Let's say they were distracted by their phone, and yeah, let's say wasted time. I know why it keeps changing because I keep going to the next line so I don't cover our race up. As a teacher, there have been many times that students should have been working on an assignment. However, when they had their phones out, instead of working, they were distracted by their phone and wasted precious time, causing them to not get all their work completed. There we go. So I have now finished my race strategy. As always, I'm going to go back and I'm going to reread my entire answer. And this is where I'm going to reread it. I'm going to make sure a couple things. I'm going to make sure I have all the parts in there. I'm going to make sure my capitalization, my punctuation, my spelling is correct. And I'm going to make sure it makes sense. Sometimes we can type slower than or we can't type as fast as our brains work, and we can't write as fast as our brains work, and so we miss things sometimes, and the only way to catch that is to go back and reread it. Here's another tip: read it out loud. Don't just read it in your head. When you make yourself say it out loud, you can catch mistakes easier. Okay, I do not think kids should have phones in school. I restated, I answered. The text states, teachers, however, argue that phones are too distracting. They say that kids are often too tempted to play games, text each other, and take pictures during instructional time. There is my C, my citing evidence. I used my STEM. I copied straight from the text because I was using evidence. I was using what the author told me. So that's a citation. And now I'm going to do my E. This is where I explain my personal experience or how I know. As a teacher, there have been many times that students should have been working on an assignment. However, when they had their phones out, instead of working, they were distracted by their phone and wasted precious time, causing them to not get all their work completed. That makes sense. Punctuation and grammar are correct. I have an R, I have an A, I have a C, I have an E. This would be a distinguished race response.